indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, a lot of business on our agenda tonight, so we'll get right to it. We do have public hearings this evening and public session items that are of public interest. So when an agenda item is denoted as a public hearing, persons attending shall be permitted to address the Board of Aldermen regarding the item under consideration. Those speaking in favor speaking first, and those against speaking second. Proponents and opponents shall each be given 20 minutes of time to speak and may choose to allow one speaker to utilize that time or choose to allocate the time amongst different speakers. In the event that either proponents or opponents have not designated a speaker or speakers to represent that view, the mayor shall divide the 20 minutes by the number of speakers. After the opponents speak, the mayor will allow the proponents 5 minutes for rebuttal. If the proponents choose to exercise this option, the opponents will also have 5 minutes for rebuttal. In the event that the proponents do not present a rebuttal, then the opponents shall be given no further time to speak. So if you'd like to speak on one of the public hearings, there are items 1A and 1B. And 1C, if you could fill out a speaker card. They look like this. They're available at the back of the room. They can be given to our town attorney, Mr. Ed Powell. And then he will give them to me and we can allocate the time appropriately. And we have a public session tonight, item 2, with several items of interest. So if you'd like to speak to any of those agenda items, if you could also fill out a speaker card so I can be sure to recognize you at the appropriate time. All right, we'll begin with public hearing 1A, which is also related to public hearing 1B. And we have an alderman who would like to be excused from hearing these cases. Do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we accept Alderman Thompson's recusal request.
Okay, and this is for 1A and 1B.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Chris, if you could step down into the audience. Okay, the first is a public hearing, item 1A, on the Kernersville Development Plan. Curtis Swisher, agent for the town of Kernersville, for consideration of an amendment to the Kernersville Development Plan to amend the land use plan from business support to high-density residential for property located at 5340 Macy Grove Road, a total of 38.26 plus or minus acres, and from business support and low-density residential to business support for property located at 5340 Macy Grove Road, containing a total of 17.96 plus or minus acres, with the PIN numbers as indicated on the agenda. Zoning docket KDP 61. And then item B is a public hearing rezoning, a two-phase conditional use rezoning from RS20 to RM18C and GOC for property located at 5340 Macy Grove Road. Zoning docket K803. So there will be one presentation, but we'll do two public hearings, and I'll recognize our Community Development Director, Catherine Garner. And you can present on both if you'd like.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. KDP 61 is the land use plan amendment. You'll see the site in the map is one large parcel currently, and so they're looking to amend the land use plan according to the rezoning boundaries. So the portion to the north is proposed to go from business support to business support to high density residential, and then the side to the east and the south would go from low density residential and business support, and it would all become business support. K803 is the associated rezoning. You can see that on the map a little bit better. There's a little pocket of low density residential here on the south side of the proposed road. This and the remaining blue area would all go to the blue of business support. And then this area on the northwest side would go to high density residential. Business support is defined as intended to accommodate a wider variety of office, corporate park, warehouse, flex space, light industrial, retail, hotel, and related uses. It sets standards for development, including limited screened outdoor storage and loading areas, enhanced front facades, and unified landscaping, lighting, and signage. High-density residential is defined as a land use that is primarily used for providing rental housing. Kernersville is fortunate that it has a large number of apartments and one of the lowest average rental costs in the triad. Expansion of the high-density land use must be carefully evaluated to prevent an oversupply that would undermine the existing high-density developments. High-density areas are located in transitional areas and have convenient access to major thoroughfares. There is a growing population in Kernersville. This is something that's not new. We're a growing community within the growing metro area. Our population grew by 14% between 2010 and 2020, according to the U.S. Census. Currently, there are few options in Kernersville for those that wish to rent or age in place. Approximately 255 of Kernersville's acres are designated as high-density residential, which is just less than a tenth of the total land area in Kernersville. The housing market and demographic trends are increasing the demand for the apartments and senior housing and just housing options in general. So completion of the Kernersville Medical Parkway and the new Piedmont Commerce Center Business Park have brought new jobs to Southeast Kernersville, only increasing the need for housing in that area. Planning Board and staff recommend approval of the resolution in the staff report to designate the property located at 5340 Macy Grove Road from business support to high-density residential for the requested portion, and then the separate portion from low-density residential to business support, subject to the rezoning in case K803. This was heard at the September Planning Board meeting, and the vote was as follows. 2 were against and 1 member was absent that night. Are there any questions about this before I move on to the rezoning portion? K803 is the subsequent rezoning request. The request is to go from RS20 to residential multifamily 18. The 18 signifies 18 units per acre is a maximum number of units. Conditional use, this is a 2-phase petition, so you're not seeing the site plan yet. That would go back to Planning Board. South of the proposed road and then this little corner up here would be general office conditional use. So during a 2-phase petition, you are considering granting the rezoning with conditions, determining if the uses, the public improvement needs, and additional conditions would be available to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of existing and future residents. And then once the rezoning is approved, if it's approved, the final development plan is submitted to the Planning Board for review of all the nuts and bolts of the site plan. The applicant's proposed uses are as follows. For the residential multifamily portion, it would be residential building multifamily and life care community, which is generally targeted at elderly housing options. General office conditional use, there's a variety of uses shown. The applicant has proposed these as a means of providing services to residents located across the street, but also as support for the medical uses along the Kernersville Medical Parkway. This site is located north of Kernersville Medical Parkway, and adjacent properties are zoned both industrial and single-family residential. So there's limited and general industrial, medical business park, and RS20 in the surrounding area. K803's initial site plan meets the requirements for the first phase of the 2-phase rezoning. The multifamily is not to exceed 688 units. That's 18 dwelling units per acre by the total acreage that they're proposing for RM18 in this portion up here. The commercial area is not to exceed 300,000 square feet of building. So at the time of the final development plan, landscaping, buffer yards, and all requirements along the public rights-of-ways and adjacent single-family residential would be verified to ensure that no adjacent properties are unduly impacted. The developer is proposing to extend the Kernersville Loop Road or Shields Road, which will be renamed Deep Fork Road on the eastern side, as called for in the thoroughfare plan. So the road itself will be constructed up to the furthest access point to their site, but the full right-of-way will be dedicated so that the road could be constructed at a future date. Access to Little John Road will be maintained at all times, but it is proposed to be realigned here where it meets Deep Fork Road. Building elevations are not required during this first phase of a two-phase rezoning, but the applicant has submitted photos as representative examples of other projects they've worked on. Staff has proposed conditions to provide additional assurance. At the planning board meeting, the applicant requested some amendments to that, and planning board modified some of the conditions, as you may have seen in the planning board report, and I have on subsequent slides. The current overlay districts in this area are the Highway Corridor Overlay District that would affect the properties, the two parcels on Macy Grove Road, and the Industrial Corridor Overlay District, which would apply to the future right-of-way of Deep Fork Road. Staff is proposing that we change the Industrial Corridor Overlay to the Highway Corridor for the portion going through this site, because the commercial buildings architectural standards are more conducive for design than the industrial corridor. So for the adjacent residential along Little John Road, the buildings would be more architecturally harmonious than the industrial corridor standards. We are also proposing to apply the Central Kernersville Overlay District standards to the residential buildings. It would not apply and modify the ordinance and the map to be Central Kernersville, but that's where the architectural standards were pulled from and based off of. The road right-of-way for the proposed loop road will be dedicated by the developer, and the dedication matches the right-of-way as outlined in the state's comprehensive transportation plan. NCDOT is currently pursuing improvements on Macy Grove Road from US 421 to I-40, and other road improvements may be required along Macy Grove Road at the time of the FDP. So the rezoning maximum would be up to 688 units, but the final number that may be developed may actually be lower based on site conditions, and that's something we won't know until the final development plan is prepared. At that time, NCDOT will review and comment on what other improvements may be required once the final site plan is developed. The land use plan was just discussed. It's currently business support and low density residential, and the proposed amendment is to business support and high density residential. The land use plan notes that demand for different types of residential units is driven by demographic changes and an aging population, and just a changing population and housing trends overall. Planning board and staff's recommendation on the rezoning is move to amend the zoning ordinance and rezone the property, in this case, from RS20 to RM18C and GOC, and amend the applied industrial corridor overlay district to highway corridor overlay district for the right-of-way through the property. We find that the conditional use district allows these specific uses to be considered to ameliorate impacts to adjoining properties. The proposed right-of-way dedication will allow the extension of the Kernersville Loop Road or Shields Road corridor as proposed in our thoroughfare and street plan, and the proposal is consistent with the land use plan as amended and our appropriate uses in this area. Planning board and staff also recommend approval of the site plan subject to the conditions as presented in the staff report and modified by planning board. Planning board wanted to see a modification to condition 3B to state that wall cladding material shall include brick or stone facade elements on a minimum of 25% of each facade. The siding shall be wood, cementitious fiberboard or hardy, or board and batten and shaker vinyl siding. That the vinyl siding was the request of the applicant. The planning board spent a lot of time deliberating. Condition 3C is that windows shall have muntins, sills, and or lintels and or shutters to add architectural variety to facade fenestration on all sides of the building. And this was the planning board vote. It was one voting against and then one absent at the September planning board meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions of Ms. Garner at this time?
Catherine, I have one. The medical parkway, the zoning and the overlay that are applicable to that, to the remaining property there, what type of uses are we looking for along that parkway?
On the medical parkway?
On the medical parkway right across from, yeah. Just in that general area, I'm just curious as to whether or not our current zoning would allow for any residential along that stretch, along that strip of parkway.
We're kind of asking two questions. So the zoning along Medical Parkway is medical business park, and so those are restricted to more medical uses. And then also in the overlay district, not the overlay, the land use plan along the Medical Parkway area is business center, and it is geared more towards hospital and ancillary uses, other business uses. So anybody who wanted to propose apartments or residential along Kernersville Medical Parkway would have to follow the same process and request an amendment to the land use plan and a rezoning.
Thank you. That gives me an idea of what our vision is for that stretch. Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. This is a public hearing on zoning docket KDP 61 only. I have one individual signed up to speak as a proponent, Amanda Hodering. If you can make sure the microphone is on and you give your business address as you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. It's nice to be here with you this evening. My name is Amanda Hodiern. I represent the applicant and also am agent for the current property owner, Mr. Gregory Senior. Just as a point of clarification, Mayor, I would like to speak in conjunction to both items, if that's all right.
Yes,
Okay,
we'll
great.
have a second public hearing following this one.
Okay, perhaps it would be best then if I reserved my time. It's a little bit hard to bifurcate comments. Would it be better if I just spoke all at once after that?
There's a time limit for both public hearings. If there's anything you'd
Yeah.
like to say as to the land use plan amendment, the time to say that would be now.
Okay, let me see if I can do it that way. Thank you. Let's see if we could pull up my presentation, please. Thank you. If we could go to the first slide. So the origin of this request is all about location, about the fact that this is a growing and changing and thriving part of Kernersville at your own doing. This is a success story that you guys have worked long and hard at, and congratulations, it's working and continuing to do so. You've got your thriving medical business parkway with the hospital and all the ancillary uses along that corridor. And then, of course, you've got your business park with the Amazon terminal hub. You've got the Amazon last mile delivery service there. You've got the FedEx service there. So there's no question that what you have set out to do is in full force here and working well. What this request is about from a land use standpoint is infusing this now successful, thriving hub that you have in this new part of town, infusing it with the bottom-up support and residential uses that will make it a well-rounded, fully integrated activity hub and center for your town. So why does it work that way? In addition to the reasons we've just said about the success you've had with the investments you've made, it also works well that way from a traffic standpoint. You heard Ms. Garner talk about looking to put residential density near access to thoroughfares. We've got that here. Not only do we have your town thoroughfares, one that this project proposes to help add to your infrastructure in the extension of the Shields Loop Road that we'll talk more about later, but system?
It's coming back in just a minute.
Okay, thank you.
So we have sound and we're about to go back live on the stream. Okay, stream is back live.
Okay, and we're getting the PowerPoint back up?
Matthias, I'm showing the PowerPoint on my screen, but it's not on either of the monitors.
All right. Thank you for your patience with our brief technical difficulties. We lost the audio visual and the microphone system there for a moment, but we've got it back on and we'll begin. We are currently in the public hearing on the Kernersville Development Plan, zoning docket KDP 61. Are you able to pick up right where you left off, or do you need us to reset the clock?
I think I'm okay picking up if that's okay
Okay.
with you all.
All right, please continue.
Thank you. So we were talking about this being a strategic location. Not only is it strategic for the reasons that you all have created with your investments in your medical parkway and your business park, but also due to its location between your two major transportation corridors. So what this really is, this land use plan amendment is really about how do you as a town maximize the investments that you've made here and set up your land use plan to achieve everything that you can out of these investments and out of this economic hub and economic development opportunity that you've created here in Kernersville. So if we could skip the site plan slide and go to, yes, thank you. So our land use pattern as it currently exists, as you heard from Ms. Garner, it currently is low density residential, which I would submit to you has been a holding pattern as this property has existed with Kernersville and in the county for quite some time. Well, now jump forward to where we are now. As we've just discussed, things are a lot different in this area. So the request before you, I believe, achieves several things to, again, maximize and bring your land use plan forward and in keeping with the economic development opportunity that you've created here. The proposed new land use pattern creates a transitional area. It sets you up for transitional zoning to make a natural step down from the medical and medical uses to the south and the industrial uses to the north and to the west, to step down from that and create not as harsh of a transition from those industrial uses to your single family low density residential that you'll still have along Macy Grove Road here. So a transitional use, of course, is a softening, a step down, as you would think from the word, so that, again, you have a softer curve of land use, and you're not creating a situation where you have single-family residences against industrial zoning. So I believe that this land use pattern creates that transition for you. It also gives you the opportunity to infuse this thriving hub that you've created with the rest of the uses that you need to round it out to become a full use, thriving economic development hub. Today, people want to live near where they work. That's how we do things now. The olden days of getting in your car and driving for 30 minutes to get home is no longer what employees want, and it's not what employers want for their employees. So we need to bring housing sites closer to these economic development employment centers. I'll give you a classic, huge example on a much bigger scale, RTP. Over in the Triangle, the biggest and most famous example of a business park, research and development, no housing. It's been there. It was first conceived in the 50s, of course, developed up more recently than that in the 80s and 90s. Guess what they're doing now? They're going back and rezoning it and changing the land use plan to add housing because that's what people want now. That's what employers are saying they need now to keep their siting there viable and thriving. So I think that we can learn a lesson from that and infuse it on smaller levels all across North Carolina and see that that is in fact what employment centers need to fully thrive. So if we've got employees in an area and we've got people living in an area, we need goods and services to support them. The second part of our amendment that Ms. Garner talked about to put the south part of the new road as a commercial designation allows that. It allows opportunities for daycares, for dry cleaning, for pharmacies, for all those things that we like to be able to do on our way home from work, on our way out the door to work. It also provides more opportunity for the ancillary supporting uses of all these big employers that you have in the area. The physical therapy center that wants to be near the hospital, the radiology group that wants to be near the hospital. All of that is a synergistic land use planning pattern, and this amendment helps you do that. Also, business support is what this area is all about, and I would submit to you that high quality housing is business support. So I would call it a subsect of that land use plan designation rather than an entirely different one, because as we've talked about, employers need high quality, attractive housing where their employees are going to want to live. When they come and visit and interview and look at that job, they're going to drive around and say, where would I live in this community? Where would I go home to each night? Housing is a critical part of that. And lastly, this plan does further your infrastructure goals. We've talked about the road connection that would be put in the right-of-way all the way through for the Shields Loop Road connection and the actual construction of it to serve the part of this project that's built at this time. That's a key illustration and example of how infrastructure is typically built with this sort of public-private partnership. When development comes in, they build the infrastructure that serves it and that helps you complete your comprehensive plan goals. I mentioned that now with the land use plan aspect, since your comp planning for thoroughfare plans is, of course, a key feature of your land use planning. So I believe I'll reserve the rest of my comments for the rezoning time, but I'll be happy to answer any questions right now about the land use plan
Thank you.
aspects.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Hodejern or Ms. Garner on the Kernersville Development Plan? Okay, is there a motion on zoning docket KDP 61, item 1A on the agenda?
And move we approve, Madam Mayor.
Okay, motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Apple. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, item 1B is a public hearing on the rezoning. We've already had a presentation from Ms. Garner, so I'll declare the public hearing open. First, we'll hear from proponents. Ms. Hodejern.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, members of the board, Amanda Hodejern, 804 Green Valley Road, Suite 200 in Greensboro. Also representing the applicant and the property owner, Mr. Gregory Senior. Just for the record, I'd like to carry forward all of my comments from the land use plan amendment into this section of the agenda, but I don't imagine you need to hear those again. So we'll dive right into the rezoning components. If we could go to my site plan slide, please. Thank you. As you've heard from Ms. Garner, this is a two-phase rezoning that we've requested, meaning you don't see the full site plan now. We're going to focus more on the land use plan aspects, but we do go ahead and lay out sort of a perimeter boundary plan, and that's what you see before you here. The most important aspect of this I would submit to you is the alignment of the road and how that really sets up the pods of this site. You see the road comes through off of Macy Grove. It will be realigned into a nice T intersection with Little John, always accessible at all times for the residents of that road. That'll create two corner out parcels, both to the north and the south of the new road for commercial use. And then as you go further into the site, it'll create the opportunity for additional out parcels along the south part of that road to create opportunity for that up to 300,000 square feet of commercial use that you heard about from Ms. Garner. I mentioned this in the previous agenda item, but we see that as being a key location, and the point of the request is to provide opportunity for all those ancillary supporting uses, not only for the residents that are already here, the employees that are already frequenting the area, for the residents we hope to bring to the area in the way of daycare, in the way of a pharmacy, in the way of a gym, all those things, again, that we like to do within our bubble near our homes, if you will, but also supporting use opportunities for the major employees here. Again, private practice groups of physicians that want to be near the hospital, pharmacies, different vendors of medical equipment that want to be near the hospital, that type of thing. Again, when you have a huge hub of a user like a hospital, that creates the need for a lot of second tier uses that need to be near that and should be near that. So you need the space for them to locate so that you can create that entire ecosystem that you've set yourselves up here. Similarly, the same is true for the logistics users that you have in this area. They also have secondary vendors and truck servicers, things of that nature that need to be near them. That's not a permitted use in our zoning, but by way of example, you can see how one big user spawns the need for several ancillary users. So you want to create that whole ecosystem. Again, we've also we've got the northern pod set up above the new road, which would be residential. This is a good size of land area. There's a rezoning request, as you've heard from Ms. Garner, would allow us a pretty sizable residential impact here. And because of that, we envision being able to serve two components of residential need here in Kernersville. One would be a more mature rental community for folks perhaps who want to downsize, want to sell off the house and not have to take care of a yard every weekend, want to be able to travel more, but are used to a nice community, are used to nicer finishes, still want to have a place to come home to that feels comfortable and feels like something they can be proud of and call home. This would be geared more towards that type of consumer. It would have more interior features. The amenities would be more geared towards gatherings like book club or cards, maybe a smaller fitness center, things not quite as spread out. The other opportunity that we could have here would be a community for that other type of renter that is becoming more common now. As Ms. Garner alluded to, more and more people are renting these days for all kinds of different reasons. The old mentality of get out, get a job, and buy a home as quick as you can is just not what we're seeing as much of these days. People can afford to rent nice places and want to do so for a variety of reasons, especially when they're in an employment center like this, where they have good jobs and they want to have a nice home to go along with that good job that they have. So we need to provide that. So this other housing opportunity that we'd like to create here would be for that type of renter, a young professional perhaps, somebody who has come to this area, has gotten this nice new job, but doesn't yet know where they want to live. So they want to rent first as they learn their new community. But again, they want to rent somewhere comfortable, somewhere that they like to come home to, that has a nice community, that has a pool where they can relax at night, that has a dog park, has amenities and finishes that they can feel comfortable in. So that's the two types of housing needs we're trying to address here, and these are the pods that we would set them up in. If we could flip along, we've talked about land use pattern. Let's talk about, again, this flourishing employment center. We hit the land use plan elements, but and their sound planning practices, they're big ticket concepts, but why do they apply here? You've got a flourishing employment center. Your Novant Health System is already a success and it's growing. They're adding a birthing center. They're adding a new cath lab. They're adding more intensive care opportunities, more beds. So this campus is growing. That means the number of visitors coming here is increasing. The doctors, nurses, techs, pharmacists, everybody who works here is also growing. Your Amazon Fulfillment Center employs 1,000 people. Your last mile facility for Amazon has 200 employees. The FedEx hub has 2,000 employees. So there's no question that you've got activity here. You've got people on the ground who want to be serviced in this area so that they don't have to add to road congestion as they drive elsewhere to go grab a bite at lunch or to go run their errands after work or to drive home at night. This is a captive audience that you have here that needs these supporting uses to round out this area. If we could go to the next slide, please. Again, focusing on the housing component. Ms. Garner talked about the need to be thoughtful and intentional with adding multifamily housing. And this shows you that you've got the capacity to do that here. We've talked a lot about the employers in the area, and that's why. You've got a lot of demand. You've got a lot of active people here who need housing, and your supply is at a place where you can afford to add to that. What this chart shows is the ratio of rent as it has changed. Let's see, I can see it better here. So your blue line is your rent amount, and your orange line is your occupancy rate. So this is just typical supply and demand, and you can see that rents are increasing here. They're getting higher and higher because your supply rather is low. So you've got capacity in your rental housing market to add units and perhaps be able to get those rents back down to an equilibrium that's more comfortable, while still being in the market for that more mature young professional type of renter. If we could go to the next slide, please. So you want to make sure that when making a land use change and adding new land uses and more of a land use to an area, that it's reasonable and balanced. We don't want to do too much. We don't want to go do it in the wrong way. So the way that we accomplish that is with zoning conditions. We have applied and proposed use conditions to ensure that the uses that can go here are compatible. So as you've seen, the northern pod that we talked about when we looked at the site plan, of course, that's all residential. We've talked about why that makes sense and why there's room in the market for that. For the commercial aspects, we limited that to the uses that you can see in your staff report, again, to curtail and restrict that, to make sure that we're not bringing a use to this area that's out of harmony or that's too jarring. We want to create a nice synergy, a nice harmony for people to live, work, play, and have their services in a bubble. We don't want to create nuisances or negative impacts. Ms. Garner and her staff proposed several conditions that you can see in your staff report, and we do agree to these with the slight changes that we worked through at Planning Board. And I'll say also the addition of the Highway Corridor Overlay District along the road that we will be building. We also like that. I think the addition of the overlay and also of the conditions that Ms. Garner's staff came up with achieve a couple of things. They create the commitments and the restrictions that I think you all look for on a zoning to ensure that the outer parameters of it are appropriately mitigated. You've got the appropriate controls in place so that when we do come back with a site plan, if we're able to be approved at this zoning phase, that site plan will be held to those standards that get put in place now. These standards about landscape buffers, about having a greenway along the stream, about the road improvements that we're going to build, about these architectural design standards. All of those things create a threshold of development standards that have to be achieved when that site plan comes in. Also, by using the Highway Corridor Overlay District, by using the residential design standards from your downtown Kernersville overlay, that creates a cohesiveness, a familiarity with Kernersville that can exist at this other hub. This is sort of a new thriving area of your town. It's not downtown, but what's attractive about Kernersville, what people are going to like about being here, is that aesthetic that you guys have curated and you've created with these standards. So Ms. Garner's idea to pick those up and move them here, I think creates a nice cohesiveness so people know and see and appreciate that they're still in Kernersville and they have those same qualitative controls. They have those same aesthetics that they can appreciate when they drive through other parts of your town. So we are happy to accept those conditions as you see printed in your staff report. And we believe that creates that reasonable and balanced aspect to this zoning that's so important. If we could go to the next slide. This is just a couple of pullouts. I know we submitted a larger packet that I hope you've had the time to peruse of all of Blue Ridge's types of projects that give you a good idea of what this project would be. Blue Ridge Development, Blue Ridge Companies is a known quantity. You can drive around, you can look at their website, you can talk to people and know what they're going to build here. Again, we've put some commitments in place through the conditions we just talked about to know that certain qualitative controls and standards will be met, and we look forward to being able to fine tune those at site plan stage. But this is just about showing you the types of communities that we're excited to have the opportunity to build here. You see things like outdoor grills for gatherings. You see playgrounds. You see here a nice resort-style pool. And you also can see in the background there the nice facades, the articulation with the different depths, with the balconies, with the gabled roofing, the different colors and building materials. That's all done to create that nice organicness and variety to these structures. If you flip to the next slide, we'll look closer at some of these, back one. Thank you. Again, kind of deep diving into these communities, indoor theaters, something that Blue Ridge likes to build. This is a pool that you would see at one of the more mature types of communities. It's smaller, more of a lounging pool, not one that you would expect to see a lot of children playing at all weekend. And then the common area. You can see here the great detail that's given to this common area so that you feel comfortable going downstairs with some neighbors, with some friends that you have over, and enjoying a nice visiting time and fellowship there in your community. So again, a lot of detail and emphasis placed on the quality and the livability of these communities, and that's what you can expect to see here. So I will leave it there for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone here in opposition? Again, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this rezoning? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Does anyone have any questions of Ms. Hodiern or our staff? Is there any discussion, or do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for approval. Kernersville is in need of housing, especially in that area with the growth. I think these are reputable people that are undertaking this big project, but it's something that Kernersville needs yesterday. We need people are starting to rent now, as opposed to buying. They want their yards taken care of, their taxes paid for them, and it's just the sign of the future in Kernersville, I think, and we're behind right now. So for the growth in that area, I think we're going to have to provide more housing. So I move approval.
So I need to ask you a question about that, Alderman Penix. With the photos that were shown, unless it's part of the conditions, that's not enforceable. And if this is a rezoning, it would run with the land. So it could be owned by or developed by probably the company, the Blue Ridge, like the attorney mentioned, but it could be developed by somebody else. They could sell it, and then that use would go with the land. Are you recommending this as an approval for a rezoning with that understanding?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do I have a second?
With that understanding, I'd second.
Okay. All right.
Madam Mayor, just as a point of clarification, the motion will be to approve the ordinance, the site plan, and the conditions as presented by staff, including the 2 amended conditions, correct?
Is that your motion?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
Is that
my
your second?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, Mr. Thompson, you may rejoin us. Thank you. When do you expect construction to begin?
So we have to go through your secondary phase. With site plan approval.
Okay.
Typically takes 6 to 8 months with engineer backup schedules right now and availability of professionals, but we plan on moving the project forward quickly.
Okay. We look forward to seeing the second part of your plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to our next public hearing. It is item 1C, public hearing on an ordinance. Curtis Swisher, agent for the town of Kernersville, for adoption of an addressing and street naming standards policy. Ms. Garner?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The addressing standards are exactly what they sound like. A document that makes the process of assigning, recording, and maintaining addresses and street names uniform throughout the town of Kernersville. We currently follow the Forsyth County addressing system. However, these standards are not specific to the town of Kernersville, and we have a few peculiarities that are specific to Kernersville. So we are proposing to codify the process we've been using as it relates to the town of Kernersville. So the planning board, or staff presented the addressing standards to the planning board at the August 8th meeting. Planning board called for a 30-day review period and directed staff to post the addressing standards online for review and comment. They were posted online on the planning board page with the ability to click directly to an online form to provide comments. We did not receive any. So planning board held a public hearing regarding the addressing standards at their September 12th meeting, and they recommend approval as submitted.
Okay, are there any questions of Ms. Garner? Okay, this is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Do I have a motion?
A motion to approve.
A motion by Alderman Thompson,
Second.
second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, before we move on to the next item, perhaps we should take a brief recess. So we will stand in recess. opportunity. If there's something you'd like to discuss with the Board of Aldermen and it is not otherwise included on the agenda, this is the time to do so. All right, seeing none, we will move on to item 2B, which is consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 10, Article 3 of the Code of Ordinances to update the noise ordinance for the town of Kernersville. I have one person signed up to speak on this. If anyone else would like to speak on it, if you could please fill out a speaker's card and give it to our town attorney, Ed Powell. All right, Mr. Swisher.
Madam Mayor, the board discussed this last month in some detail, so I will not rehash all of that. The board sent Mr. Powell and myself back to come back with a draft ordinance with basically 3 updates. You have those updates in your packet there at the end of the ordinance on page 6 and 7. The first update was the criminal penalties. The board wanted to increase the fine for each violation from $250 to $500. We added the civil penalties section, which will allow us for the civil penalty each day there's a violation. The first one's $100, and for each violation occurs within a 12-month period, it will be $300 per violation. We can do that in conjunction with the criminal penalty, or we can do it separately by itself. And the last item that was added to the noise ordinance is the injunctive and equitable relief. Basically, is what that says is if an establishment has received over 3 violations within 6 months for violation of Article 3 of the Chapter 10, then we will go to court and seek relief to restrain and prohibit the said noise for a period of 6 months. So basically, once they receive the 4th one, then we will go to court, take out a order, get the judge to issue an order restraining the violation for up to 6 months. And that the institution of an action for injunctive relief will not relieve any party to such proceeding from any criminal or civil penalty. So we will do that in conjunction with. So in other words, if we go to court and seek injunctive relief, they will still have to go to court for either the civil or the criminal violation. Those were the only 3 changes that the board asked to have made to the noise ordinance at the last meeting. So you have those 3 in your packet. I'll be glad to answer any questions related to those 3 changes or to anything in the noise ordinance that I covered last month.
Okay. All right, I have one citizen signed up to speak. It's Andy Kennedy. Okay. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak to this item? All right, is there any discussion by the board?
Yes, I have something I'd like to say. Of course, I had urged the board not to add these extra conditions to this particular ordinance. And my reasoning behind that was that the ordinance has never been enforced. The one we came up with 6 months ago, it's never been enforced. And at this point in time, we don't know whether it'll work or not. And in my opinion, this is over the top. But again, I have voiced that, and that's where I'm at. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, do I have a motion?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Mayor. I would like to make a motion that we adopt the noise ordinance in its entirety as proposed in the most recent revisions, including but not limited to the increase in the fine limit to $500 from $250, and including the civil penalties and injunctive relief that we've talked about. Basically, the ordinance as drafted currently.
Okay, so your motion is to adopt the ordinance as drafted.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Alderman Thompson. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Okay, got 4 in favor. All those opposed? Mr. Barrow opposed. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is item C, consideration of a resolution setting the public hearing for a voluntary annexation petition by the property owner for property located at 0 Kerner Road, containing 55.659 acres more or less. Ms. Garner?
This is the requirement from the rezoning that was heard in 2021 for the residential rezoning on Kerner Road. They're currently in our ETJ, and they were required as part of their rezoning to voluntarily annex. So staff is requesting that you set a public hearing for your next meeting to hear the annexation request.
Okay, are there any questions? All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alderman Thompson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed. Mr. Barrow's opposed. Item D, consideration of a resolution setting the date for a public hearing for a voluntary annexation petition by the property owner for properties located on Stack Road, Grays Landing Road, containing 204.72 acres more or less. Ms. Garner?
Madam Mayor, this is a petition from North Point Development. They are pursuing another expansion to the business park that they are developing off of Macy Grove Road. This is on the eastern side of the creek, closer to Bunker Hill Road. And so they have submitted the voluntary annexation request listed on the agenda. And likewise with the previous, we are requesting that you set a public hearing for your next meeting to hear their petition.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Move we approve.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Apple. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, item E is discussion regarding the possible addition of Stafford Oaks Drive to the town's street maintenance system. Mr. Swisher? The presentation will be by our Public Services Director, Doran Malpa, who has been out there. And studied the issue, because we get this request fairly often to add a street to our public maintenance system. So we've got a procedure for analyzing it and adopting streets if they meet the criteria. So I'll recognize Mr. Doran Malpa.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Board. A few citizens of the Stafford Oaks subdivision have
Let me
approached.
stop you there. Can everyone hear him well? Is the microphone picking up well enough?
How's that?
You can put the microphone up on the top if that helps.
How about now?
No, it was better before.
Okay. I'll just bend over. How's that?
Sorry about that. We need a lift desk podium there.
Like I said, a few residents have approached, I think, Curtis and myself over probably the last couple of years, and they may have approached a few of you, and I'm not sure about the possibility of bringing Stafford Oaks Drive into our system for public maintenance. And therefore, Curtis asked me to go look at it and analyze the current situation, and that's the presentation I have tonight. If, Catherine, will you bring that up, please? Next page. Here in a minute, I'll go over these current conditions based or in comparison to what we require. But currently, you can see that the location of Stafford Oaks Drive is off of Main Street near the what is it? The Masonic Lodge. And the current conditions are, you can see the roadway width is 25 foot face to face. The curb and gutter is 1.5 feet wide. The pavement's 22 feet wide. And you can see from the other comments, there's some brick paved areas in certain places throughout the neighborhood, but it's not consistent. So you really can't count it as sidewalk. And the asphalt itself is in really bad shape. And I know the subgrade's poor because I'll show you some pictures as we move forward. Okay. The first picture to the left is the entrance. And when I said the width of that was 25 foot, that's from the face of the gutter to the face of the other gutter. And the picture on the right, the reason I took that was to show you that's a common sidewalk area. It's only a few feet wide, which doesn't meet our standards. But more importantly, most of those areas have obstacles in the way, such as that light post. So it's not ADA accessible. Next. This is down in the lower part of the road. You can see what I was talking about. There's no sidewalks on either side there. And the picture on the right shows a typical section of the roadway and how alligatored it is. Next slide. That's at the very end. They've had problems there, and they tried to patch it with concrete, and you can see how the concrete is broken up and shoved to the side. That's an indication that the subgrade below the pavement is in poor condition. So I'm a pretty good chances the whole neighborhood is in similar shape. Now here was the comparison. For us to accept it into the public maintenance, it would have to be brought up to our standards. And to the right is our current standards. We require 28-foot face-to-face. They have 25. We require a 2.5-foot wide sidewalk. Theirs is only 1.5. The roadway width is required to be 24. Theirs is 22. Now that's kind of deceiving because since they only have a 1.5-foot curb and gutter, they're still missing 2 feet of the gutter line too. So it's even 2 feet shorter than the comparison. We require the 5-foot sidewalk with a 3-foot grass strip on both sides of the road. They have inconsistent, I wouldn't even call it sidewalk. It's just brick pavement from the back of the curb up to some of the houses, not all of them. Our asphalt requirement is 3.5 inches. Theirs, we pulled up a few places that was cracked up and we measured 2 inches. And of course, the subgrades are in terrible shape. And we don't know how bad unless we were to core it, but we require 8 inches of compacted stone, then the 3.5 inches of asphalt on top of that. Next slide. I don't know if you can see that, but I put this one on here just to show you that this is in our ordinance and our standard specifications. That is a typical roadway section that we accept into public maintenance. So with that said, I've been here, 29 years now? As far as I can remember, there's no board ever accepted a street into public maintenance that did not meet our standards. So this one, they have no possibility to because of the width. If you wanted to lower those standards, then you still got the conditions of the roadway itself, but I would suggest that we not do so.
Okay, thank you for your analysis. All right, are there any comments or questions? Go ahead, Mr. Apple.
I have a question, Mayor. Doran, and I'm not suggesting this justify our deviating from what you're recommending, but if we don't accept it for maintenance, who maintains it?
Who's our homeowners association?
Okay.
We have a few of those in town, at least 6 that I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, they do have a homeowners association. It is their responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question, Doran. How did this get in this mess? Right in the middle of our town, how did they wind up building a subdivision with roads that are non-compliant? How did that happen?
Well, the developer has a choice to, even right now in the current standards, which we've been talking about presenting a change to you guys, but I don't know how far it goes back, 20, 25 years. We've allowed private subdivisions to be built, which means private roads, and they're responsible for the maintenance of such.
So the only way we could accept it is if they brought it up to standards, correct?
Correct.
Is there any way that would work with the narrowness, the several foot narrowness? Is there a way that we could do that? I mean, if their homeowners association met the town halfway or work towards getting it to where it would pass muster with you.
I don't think we could do it because of the widths of the roadway. I don't think we could build it and make it handicap accessible. which we would have to since we'd be reconstructing it.
And the town approved this
I
in the
don't,
day.
yeah, in the day, yes.
And John, a lot of those were, back in the day, we don't recommend them really anymore for private streets for this reason, though we have some newer subdivisions that do have private streets, and even one that's not complete yet that's private streets. But the reason the developers came in and requested private streets where they could, they can make the streets more narrow, not do the sidewalks, this and that, and they can save money on the project. Then they dump the subdivision off on the HOA, and 25 years down the road, you're in this situation with the streets. I'm guessing the HOA probably doesn't have enough in reserves to come in and fix the streets. That's why they want the town to take it over. And we see that in several of the subdivisions in town where there are private streets. And we don't encourage the developers, we really discourage it from doing private streets. But sometimes there's other reasons they do it. They may not be able to meet the setback and so forth if they do it to town standards, so they want to go the private route. But ultimately, in the long run, this is what you get.
So that street's kind of like a parking lot of an apartment complex, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Essentially.
Yep.
Are they taxed the same as everybody else,
Yes.
even though they don't have a street? Okay. Thank you.
And the worst part of that, Alderman Barrow, is I think the first group of individuals that buy homes in there probably realize, or they're told, hey, this street is the responsibility of the HOA. And as they move and sell and everything, 3 homeowners later, they have no idea. And then it really is an issue.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing further on this, our next item is item F, which is discussion and consideration of an agreement with Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden. Alderman Thompson has asked to be excused from consideration of this. Do I have a motion for that?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we accept his request for recusal.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Okay, Mr. Swisher, I'll recognize you.
Madam Mayor and Board, you have in your packet both a resolution and an agreement. I'm mainly going to cover the agreement as opposed to the resolution, but they say a lot of the same things. We were approached probably a year ago now, maybe over a year ago, but it's been close to a year for sure, about the possibility of the town assuming the operations of the botanical garden. And so we worked through that with David and Greg Senior, and we've came to the agreement that you have before you. And before I go into great detail about that, in the process of this, the reason behind it, and I think everyone on the board asked me, what's the logic behind this? Why do we want to do this? And as you can see from some of the wording and so forth in the resolution, the garden is a great asset for the town of Kernersville. It attracts a lot of visitors every year, has a lot of events. I mean, it's just a great place. And what they've done there and what they continue to do is a tremendous asset and a tremendous tourist attraction for the town. And so in discussing it with David and Greg, they felt like, town staff felt like, and ultimately I think the board has expressed the same sentiment, that to keep the garden operating and keep it in perpetuity and best ensure that, the best way to do that is for the garden to be operated by the town. The town hopefully is not going anywhere for anytime soon. We'll be here hopefully in perpetuity as well. And, the garden may transition through board of directors, through owners and everything else. And so to keep that garden operating and to keep it an integral part of the town, everyone felt the best way to do that was for the town to operate it. So what we've done is we've worked out the numbers. I've shared those numbers with you all from their operating budget. And also, there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained by the town actually operating the garden, as opposed to just the garden operating by itself as a sole entity. You know, I know when we first started discussing it early on, I think the garden was looking at buying, at that time, they said, hey, we need a new tractor or whatever. You know, they had to work that in, had to struggle with that. That's something, you know, I told them, I said, well, there's one efficiency there. You know, the town, we've got tractors and we can do that. So you gain that type of operating efficiency. The garden would be under Parks and Recreation, so we have employees that can help them when they need the extra help. They could help our employees in some things that we do. So we would have that. And again, you know, the biggest thing is that it ensures that the garden is there. So with that said, in the agreement, the way the agreement would work and the way it's worded is the town would assume the real property there, the building, the land. It's about 7 acres. I think the tax value on it is about $2.8 million. We would assume that for the mortgage, what's owed on the mortgage. It's about $335,000. Got the payoff as recently as yesterday for the end of November. That's about what it is. So we pay off the mortgage that's owed. They would deed that property over to the town, and then we would own it. As you see, I know there was a lot of discussion on both sides as to what happens if, you know, the town does not want to operate the garden anymore. And you'll see under Article 9, it says if at any time in the future the garden is not considered a benefit to the town or it becomes no longer reasonably sustainable, the town shall have the right to use all the real and personal property for another governmental purpose, or the town shall have the right to sell the real and personal property of the botanical garden. Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden will have first right of refusal. They have a board set up. They'll have first right of refusal to purchase that. If they choose not to do that, then we'll put it on the open market and sell it for fair market value, and the town retains the proceeds from that sale. So wanted to clarify that for the board. And then the way that the operations itself would work, again, we would be responsible for the day-to-day operations. The employees that are there would become employees of the town. We would oversee everything with the garden. The Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden Board would focus on long-term projects and raising capital to do those long-term projects. Of course, the town would assist in that as well, but there's a master plan that's attached in your packet. We would develop the garden based on that master plan. It's a great plan. It was done several years ago. There's no need to deviate from that. But if there becomes a reason to deviate from that, both parties have to agree to it, which I think should. That way that one party doesn't go in and say, hey, I want to put something over here. Both parties have to agree to it. So there are some revenue sources that come to the garden. The town will receive the following revenue. We will receive 90% of general donations given to either Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden or directly to the town as a donation. We would receive 100% of indoor and outdoor facility rental income and 100% of the grants the town receives and 1/2 of the gift shop profit. Now, we may tweak this some on the gift shop side, and we'll look at that as we get into the agreement. But right now it would be half, they get half. The garden would receive 10% of general donations made either to the town or PJCBG, Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden, 100% of grants that it receives, corporate donations, tributes, membership dues, endowment, legacy gifts, and 1/2 of the gift shop profit. Revenues generated by programming, workshops, and events would be retained by the entity that produces them. So if the garden has a month-long, 1 day a week workshop on horticultural or plants or something in that range, and they charge a minimal fee for that, they would keep that. If we have an event in the building that's month, 2 months, whatever, we would keep that. So whichever entity has that event is one that retains the revenue. The garden board may use the indoor facility 12 times per year and outdoor facility 4 times per year. I've been asked about how that would work. It's just simply a scheduling thing. We would schedule it the same way we schedule programming at all of our other facilities. We have a master schedule. You can go online, you can book it, and it shows up when it's booked and who has it. So that would be easy enough to do that. We also, each side has to retain the naming schedule and the naming fee that's set out. I think it's Exhibit A. It shows who's already has what area named in the garden for them, and then it has fees and prices. If someone would like to name the building after themselves or someone else, there's a price to that. We're bound by that, as well as the garden board would be bound by that. We would look, if the board approves this tonight, our plan would be for this to, we would close on the detransfer and everything else, and we would hope to have that in place by the end of November 30th. And we would look for those employees at that time to come over to be part of the town. There's 5 employees or 5 positions, 5 employees. I think all the positions are filled that we would look to bring over from the garden into the town. They would fit right into our pay scale. So that would not be an issue. And so we would hope to have that done again by November 30th. We've reviewed the agreement as you have it. It is, the seniors have reviewed it as well as the board of the garden. We are okay with it. We think that it's a good agreement for both parties. We're in favor of the agreement. If you have any questions about the agreement, I'd be glad to answer those. And that's all I have on it. I think there's some folks here from the garden to speak. So if you have any questions after that or before that, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Swisher. I have 2 individuals signed up to speak, Kevin Bugg and David Senior. So Kevin, you signed up first. You're deferring to David. David Senior.
Thank you. It doesn't go up. David Senior, 215 South Main Street here in Kernersville. I'm a board president of the board of directors for the Botanical Garden. Good evening, Ms. Mayor and members of the board. Appreciate you having us here this evening. We're very excited. Just like to take a quick second to recognize our amazing board of directors. You probably know a lot of them. If I can have them stand up, please. Mr. Ron Clower, Pat Thomas, Janie Veach, Dwayne Long, Patty Stone, Kathy Lamb, and of course, Greg Senior and myself. So thank you for being here. I'd like to also introduce our director of the garden, Adrian Rothling, and our head gardener, Josh Williams, here with us this evening. Thank you for everybody for being here. In 1998, when our father told my brother Greg and me that he wanted to start a foundation to build a botanical garden here in Kernersville, we never could have imagined the outcome. Quite frankly, I don't know that we truly knew what a botanical garden was back then, but we definitely have come to know since then. And we never could have imagined the support that we would have received from the community of Kernersville, from the Triad, and frankly, from the entire state. It's really been fantastic. Thousands and thousands, or hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteer time, millions of dollars of donations have all gone into making this garden a possibility. And we definitely couldn't have imagined the garden being such an integral part of Kernersville's historic downtown, with the Kerner's Folly, the Kernersville Museum, all of the wonderful shops and restaurants of Kernersville. It's just truly been humbling and amazing what's happened since 1998 when this was posed to us by our father. Our official grand opening of the Welcome Center and most of the garden spaces was in 2011. In that 11 years, we've really seen the garden mature and continue to expand. Since the grand opening, we've been able to add a few spaces. We've added the event stage. We've been able to hold some concerts and chamber of commerce concerts and our own concerts. We've added the Japanese garden, the children's learning garden, our boulder garden, and soon to come on October 18th, we'll be have completed and opening to the public a new water feature that we're very excited about. But now with this incredible opportunity to partner with the town of Kernersville, we not only feel that this will give our board of directors, and I stress there are board of directors because we're going to be right here for hopefully for generations to come as well, working with the town to help make sure that this garden continues to be what it is and continues to grow. But we feel that this board of directors will give us the ability to add garden spaces at a more steady pace than we've been able to over the last 11 years. So that's one thing that really excites us. But more importantly, this will help protect this asset for generations to come. Greg and I are going to remain involved in this garden for many years to come, but we're not going to be here forever. So we wanted to make sure that we could put together a plan that would help this, our father's dream, continue forever, generations. So in closing, thank you very much for your consideration. All of your past support is tremendous. We appreciate it. And for your willingness to help preserve this incredible asset. But one last thing, I'd like to thank Mr. Swisher, his time and effort to working with us and putting in this, making this happen. I really do appreciate it. It's been a huge help. Be here with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Mr. Bug?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to withdraw my speaker card, please.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any, well, first of all, I want to express appreciation to everyone serving on the board of the garden. I really appreciate your dedication and work, and a lot of the people in this room, I also am aware of the hours you have spent creating those decorative flower lights at the holidays. And I remember talking about Adrian about the Christmas tree idea last year. So it's been a great thing for the community, very enjoyable, and something that I've had a lot of fun telling elected officials from other communities that they ought to stop by and see as they are in the Kernersville area. So is there any discussion or questions?
Madam Mayor, I don't have a question, but I guess I want to speak to Paul and David. Your dad is smiling down on you tonight. He's smiling down on what you've done to bring his dream to reality. I think he's smiling down because the garden after which memorializes him has become one of several crown jewels in Kernersville. And one does not have to have lived here all his or her life to recognize that. But he has got to be proud of you. Thank you.
This is a finer point just on the agreement. As we go towards the closing and the deed, I think it might be important to define more specifically the right of first refusal with timeframes and the notices so that everyone knows the procedure for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I talked to Mr. Powell about that today, and we will have an attachment that goes with the deed so that it's recorded when the deed is. It has those specifics in it.
I don't anticipate it ever being needed. All right. Do I have a motion?
I'd make a motion.
Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Barrow. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Penix. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. Thank you. We look forward to great things working together for the garden for the future. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, for clarification, that motion is to approve both the resolution and the agreement, correct?
Mr. Thompson. He's getting his steps in today. All right, the next item is item G, consideration of submission of a scope of work proposal to the Office of State Budget and Management for a grant for parks and recreation projects.
Madam Mayor and Board, this is one of three grants that the town received from the state. This one is for $200,000, $250,000. I'm sorry, the next one's for 200. This one is for $250,000, and it is specific to parks and recreation projects. So you have a memo in your packet outlining those projects. There are 6 of them. Ernie put those together based on his needs over in Parks and Recreation, and it's mainly a lot of things that were in the budget that were eliminated and a couple of new items that have came up since the budget was adopted. So you have in your packet, one of the first of those is the basketball court renovation at 4th of July Park. Then we have the Lions Club shelter at Harmon Park, and that has been in the budget, I think, 3 or 4 times, Ernie, and has been removed every year. Our philosophy was, well, if it's still standing right now, it'll work, and it's almost not standing, so we might want to go ahead and replace it. Got the playground swing bridge replacement at the 4th of July Park, tennis court resurfacing at 4th of July. We've got some entrance privacy fencing at the mountain bike park, and then security locking systems to enhance our security at multiple parks. So we have those 6 items that we'll submit. The way this works, you all approve the scope of work tonight. If you're in favor of these, we will submit these to the state, and then they will let us know whether they are acceptable. If they are, they'll send us back the grant, which will come back to you all for approval. If they are not, they will send us back information as to which ones are not, and then we will go back and get some more. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. Ernie's here. He can certainly answer the details of any questions that you have regarding any of these projects much better than I can. So with that, I'm done with that.
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Penix. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Mr. Swisher, you're not done. You're going to have to oversee getting these installed.
Yeah. I got a few more left.
All right. Done with the explanation. All right, we'll move on to item H.
This is the one that is for $200,000. This one is for its capital and infrastructure, meaning mainly either capital projects or equipment. We did not have any capital projects that we thought we could really get started and get done in the scope of time with a grant, but we do have some equipment that has been in the budget several times in the last few years, and it has been eliminated. But you see those 4 pieces of equipment that we're recommending. We have a utility compactor down in public services, a tractor and a mower, asphalt crack sealer. We currently rent or just pay the folks to come in and do that. So we have our own, we can do it much cheaper. And then we have a John Deere utility terrain vehicle that will replace one of our current vehicles. So those total out $200,000 for that grant. Same procedure. We will submit that to the state. The state will let us know whether those are allowable, and if they are, we will bring it back to you all for final approval of the grant. Either, and I didn't say this with the last one, but neither of these grants require a match. So there's no match on our part. It's just $250,000 and $200,000. The third grant, I said there were 3. The third grant we hope to bring to you next month. It's also for infrastructure. It is $400,000. It's for capital and infrastructure. We have a larger infrastructure project that we're going to try to submit for that one. So it will be hopefully next month when we bring it back to you. And that is all for that one, Madam Mayor.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion by, I'm not sure who.
It was Bill.
Alderman Thompson.
Okay.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem Apple. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, item I, consideration of amendment to an employment agreement with the town manager and an ordinance setting the town manager's compensation for fiscal year 2022, 2023. And the documents associated with that, the ordinance and the amendment to the employment agreement, are available on the town website as part of the agenda items for this meeting. Mr. Swisher, the Board of Aldermen has evaluated you and feels like you're doing a very good job for the town of Kernersville. I enjoy working with you. It's clear from this agenda that the complexity and the number of matters that the town of Kernersville faces in its usual course of business has dramatically increased during the time you've served as town manager. You're doing a really good job working with the citizens, as we request you to do, and working with our staff. We have an excellent staff and just so many outstanding department heads and employees that make the lives of the people running businesses in Kernersville and the citizens living in Kernersville so much better. And we thank all of our department heads and all of our staff for your commitment to serving the community. The leadership starts at the top, and we think you have done a very good job as town manager, setting the tone at town hall for excellence in our employees. And we'd really like you to stay around and not be done and keep working for us for the next term of your employment. So I enjoy working with you. We've worked together for a long time, and I'd like to continue working with you. So are there any other comments, or do I have a motion? Okay, we'll have to do it as two separate votes. So would this be a motion to approve the amendment to the employment agreement? Okay, I have a motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Next, I need a vote to approve the ordinance setting the town manager's compensation. Okay,
I'd make that motion.
Okay, I've got a motion by Alderman Barrow. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous.
Madam Mayor and Board, I thank you for renewal of that. I told you in closed session, I appreciate that. I do. And I thank you for your leadership on the board. I told you in closed session, I'll tell you now in open session, it's you six that make my job easy. You make my job easy, and the folks out here in the audience that are in charge of each department also make my job easy. Without them, I couldn't do my job. And without you six, we couldn't do our job. So thank you, and thank you for your leadership and for what you do for the town every day. And so I certainly appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to work for you some more. And I'm not done. As I said on the last one, I'm just done with that, but I'm not done. I look forward to being here. Hope to be here. Been here 15 years. Hope to be here at least 15 more, maybe a little bit longer. I hope I won't be too old to mosey into my office every morning, but certainly do appreciate it. You all make my job easy by allowing us to do it. Not just me, but the folks out here that are in charge of each department. You give us that leeway and flexibility, and it is certainly appreciated. So thank you again.
Thank you. All right, back to another one of the projects you've helped work on for the town for many, many months now. Consideration of a contract detailing a design scope of work for the renovation of Beeson's Crossroads Fire Station.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Board, you're correct, Mayor. This has been a little bit of a long project, but in the end, it has worked out well. As you know, we are now occupying Beeson's Fire Station along with Beeson's. You have a memo in your packet, and let me start by saying we got this agreement yesterday afternoon at about 5:15. It was uploaded this morning, but it came to us before that. Mr. Powell reviewed it, made changes to it, sent it back to them, and they were reviewing it and sending it back to us. So what you have is the board has already approved the renovation of the Beeson's Crossroads Fire Department. It's in the budget for fiscal year 22-23. You adopted a resolution. You have that R 2022-29 that authorized the town to use the design build contract. So once you adopted that, we went out for requests for proposals, and we had some contractors submit those proposals, the town selected Samet Corporation to be the design build contractor for the project. It's what you have in your packets, pretty much a standard design build contract produced by the American Institute of Architects. But what you have mainly in there is the contract for the design of the building. We have to design it before we can put it out to bid. As you all are familiar with going through the same process, a little bit different process, but it's kind of the same process with the Parks and Rec building. The design services, $290,650. That sounds like a lot, but on a $3 million building, that's reasonable. It's actually a little cheaper than what we've seen some of them. So it's a little bit less than 10%. So the other contract, as you see in there, a later date, the board will be requested to conduct a public hearing on the financing of the project. You'll have to consider that, and also the cost of the contract for the design, not for the design, but for the actual construction itself. So that will come back to you all. But this is mainly for the contract of the design, and saying that Samet will be the one to do the design services. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. Mr. Powell can answer any as he reviewed the initial contract when it went over to Samet, and then has reviewed it since it came back with no changes in it. We would have gotten this loaded a lot earlier than we did, but it came in when it came in. And Samet, so you know, Samet is also the company that's doing the building, I guess the management of the construction of the Parks and Rec building. Been greatly pleased with their services on that project, and so we feel confident we'll have the same success with them on this project.
Are there any questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the contract? Got a motion by Alderman Penix.
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, we are to the consent agenda. These matters are considered to be routine by the Board of Aldermen and will be enacted by one motion with no separate discussion unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the matter will be removed from the consent agenda and considered under the following item. A, approval of minutes for the August 31 closed session. B, approval of minutes for the September 6 closed session. C, consideration of an agreement with the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, and this is in relation to the cross-country events. D, consideration of a memorandum of understanding with Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, and this is in relationship to rentals of fields. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to see an item removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there any board member who'd like to see an item removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alderman Thompson.
Second.
Got a second by J.R. Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you, Alderman Gorham. Okay, we are to the town manager's report. Mr. Swisher?
I have nothing, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And then the town attorney's report.
I don't have any reports tonight either.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Matters to be presented now by the mayor and board of aldermen. I'll start with Mr. Penix. Thank you. Mr. Gorham? Thank you. Mr. Apple?
Mayor, I'd just like to say tonight, I think this is, as Alderman Penix expressed when we did the acquisition of the land around Ivy Redmond Park, if we don't come away from this meeting tonight thinking that we've done some good things for the future of Kernersville, I think we've missed it. I'm proud to be part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Apple. Mr. Vera?
I'd just like to say one thing to Curtis about the job he's done and the contract we approved. Before I came on the board, I might be a little prejudiced, but I've always thought the world of Curtis and thought he did a great job. But in the last 9 or 10 months since being on the board, I'm truly amazed. He does a great job, and he attracts the best people. I've had the opportunity to work with all the different department managers, and it's really a good thing, and it's a good thing you're doing, Curtis, and the way you do it. Your leadership is unequaled that I've seen. And I just want to thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Apple, did you have a second point?
I just wanted to say one thing. I'd like to give our department heads here and those who aren't an applause for the job you've done for us.
Thank you, Matthias, for your cool head under the pressure of the minor technology issue we had earlier tonight. It was very impressive that you got us back up and running, and we appreciate all that you do for tech for our town and the entire IT department. All right, it's the fall season. A lot is going on in Kernersville, so stay informed and stay involved. There's a lot of great things happening in our community this month. Just one of them is the water feature being installed at Senior Gardens, and there's a lot of other great things planned by the Chamber of Commerce and other organizations in our community for the fall season. So plenty to do in Kernersville this fall. Is there any further business before the board this evening? Okay, I have a motion to adjourn by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Wow.